Welcome to the Cabrera Lab Podcast.
Hey,
What's up?
everything's up.
No?
For me, today, my perspective is sunny and up.
Oh, got it.
So metaphorically, not
Metaphorically
literally.
speaking, not
You're like
literally.
you're like Commander Data on Star Trek. You're so literal. Everything is literal for you. Like, no, the floor is down. Like, okay,
Technically, there's no up or down.
just let's not start that.
I mean, like,
All right, we have an interesting episode today, which is related to a paper that we recently
it's better than a not interesting
Yeah.
episode.
I mean, I'm sure there are some that are not interesting to people. I would never assume that we're interesting all the time.
I think we are.
Okay, well,
I suspect we are.
maybe.
I'm just kidding.
It's hard to know on a
Hard
given
to
day
tell.
because it's all perspective.
We get some comments that are like, what was that? It's
Really?
usually in the shorts.
Oh, I don't read the
Because
comments.
the shorts are sometimes taken out of context
Yeah.
of the wider thing, and then people go, "What is this person talking about?"
Yeah, because they've surgically.
And then they get very vitriolic, and
And then you meet them with grace
then
and
they come
dignity,
around.
and you say
Exactly.
something sweet, and then everybody's good.
Less sweet, more reason.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. So back to what I was saying. We wrote a paper.
Yes.
Just the title needs some explanation, and then we'll go into the actual paper itself because I think it will be very interesting to people and may actually push the envelope a little bit on their understanding of things, even basic things. The title of the paper is The Grammar of Reality.
Yes.
And I would say on its face, it could be widely not understood.
Yes.
How is there a grammar to reality, and what does it even mean, and why did we name it that?
Well, so grammar in linguistics, for example, grammar is the rules that govern the structure of language. So, language is pretty important. We speak a language.
We do.
The rules that govern the structure of that language, how the language is structured, is the grammar. So sometimes scientists use the term grammar to describe the rules that underlie the structure of something, and using language somewhat metaphorically, that there's a language of the universe, there's a language of reality, there's a language of how things are structured. And again, the word language there is being used somewhat metaphorically. And so grammar is the underlying rules of that structure.
The grammar of reality is about the underlying structural patterns of both the natural world, like the actual world, the real world, and how we think about that world.
Yep.
So the first thing that we really talk about is that reality is actually structured using the same four patterns as any other thing, that things are not fixed. They're all part of this structural patterns, and maybe we should elaborate on that a little bit.
If you talk about reality, that sounds very heady, right? Sometimes just calling it the real world is a little less heady than reality, man.
Yeah.
Because reality sounds kind of far out.
That's sort of philosophical.
Yeah. So the real world, right? And if you take that, that's also reality. The dude abides reality kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, whoa. So the real world. But if you want to take that down to a more pragmatic level, it's the situations and the systems and the reality that you exist in every day, the things that you interact with.
Your everyday
experiences. Yes.
Yes.
That's all part of what we might call reality or the real world. We might think how we think out here, how we think about that reality or that situation, it's like we create this visual separation. But in actuality, how we think is part of reality. And even if you think about the universe and all of its rules and all of its evolution and all that stuff, we and our brains evolved inside of that universe. So the rules that govern the universe and the rules that govern your brain, one would expect, aren't that different.
There's some parallelism.
There's
some
huge
parallel to
parallelism,
them,
right?
yes.
That's called isomorphism.
Yes.
So it's not like, it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that the structure of the universe and the structure of how we think might have some similarities.
No, I'm not. Well, yes, but I also think the popular or normative perception of those things is very different than what is being said right now.
Yeah.
Right. So we've had experiences where we're in an assembly at a school, and kids believe that thinking just happens.
Yes.
Like breathing, it just happens, right? And
it does.
It does.
It does just happen.
Yes, but they experience the world as finite objects and experiences. They don't see the patterns that connect their experiences.
Well, prior to that, I would say they experience the world as if what they're experiencing is the reality.
Right.
And we all experience the world that way. So the first step is what we call reality bias, is kind of separating out that what you're experiencing isn't necessarily the reality.
Right.
Right? Because we have a very strong bias to think, I'm experiencing something, I take offense to something somebody says, they meant to offend me.
Right.
Therefore, they did mean to offend me and they have offended me. That's my experience.
Yeah.
So that's the reality.
That's what's real.
Well, maybe not.
Right.
That person knew what they were doing. Maybe not.
Right, because
that person cut me off in traffic and they meant to do it. Maybe, or maybe they were on the phone and just heard something terrible about one of their children, or are distracted, or just heard something at work, or something really important was happening. So maybe your experience is reality. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, what's missing in that equation is that there's this lens of our mental models, and in a lot of ways, mental models are sort of how we're interpreting reality and what we believe, regardless of how accurate what we think we're seeing actually is. Like, we don't always question that it could be inaccurate, that what we're thinking is just our best guess at what's actually happening.
Yes. It's our best guess, and a guess is kind of, in science, we call a guess a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. It's an educated guess, basically. Right. Sometimes not so educated. But so we're guessing all the time. We're making guesses all the time. Mm-hmm. But the whole point is we got to confirm that those guesses are accurate.
Right.
We have to test whether those guesses are accurate.
Right.
So just understanding that we have these things called mental models, which are essentially guesses, opinions about the world, and then understanding that we need to test it against the world rather than look into the world and confirm it. That's called confirmation bias.
Right.
Right. So test against the real world and say, hey, I think you meant to, hurt my feelings. Is that true?
Right. And then
how would we test that?
Then you'd hear the other perspective, and then the reality would come into focus, the actual reality, or a better approximation of the reality.
You go in the loop, and you get slightly more accurate over time.
So I think people can understand, because of, if they're listening to the podcast, that there are some underlying structures or structural patterns to how we think. We've talked about them a lot, right? That we distinguish things, we systematize things, we relate things.
Yep. DSRP.
We take perspectives.
Yeah.
What I think might be a slightly bigger lift for people is, well, how is that parallel to the way that reality is organized, right? The mind versus nature kind of thing. Because I think people can see it in the way they build mental models, but then there's some confusion as to why or how reality has got the same underlying structure.
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit of a mind bender of an episode if we go down this track. But
so put your seatbelt on.
Put your seatbelt on.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Because if you think it's a mind bender, it's definitely a mind bender.
Well, I don't think it's a mind bender. I think a lot of folks would be surprised at how impermanent the world really is. It's like the old saying that a man never steps into the same river twice. Mm-hmm. And what is meant by that saying is that the river is moving, and people kind of get that.
Yeah.
But the man is moving too. Mm-hmm. The man is changing from one time to the next,
minute by minute,
second by second, and the earth that the river is on is moving.
Yep.
Careening through space, and space is moving, careening through space. So, it is just such an impermanent web or cloud of probabilities that come together to form that moment. I think the way we experience the world, because of our somewhat limited perception, is we experience the world as discrete events and discrete objects.
Right.
Even though in reality, the world is just a massively dynamical place.
So what are the implications of seeing that?
Well, the first implication is just total enamored coolness, which I don't think we talk about enough, Like, I think,
coolness.
Yeah, like just being enamored with how cool shit is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so cool.
Like the whole universe.
The whole universe is so cool.
From the quantum to all the way
to
up.
The metaverse. Like, there's just so many cool things happening all the time, everywhere you look. And I don't think we talk enough about that. I think we've gotten away from those intangible, remarkable things that make us feel alive. And we're so focused on, career and our profession and all the complexities of our families and all these different things that are all important. So we want to know, like, what's the payout? What's the ROI? And we'll get to that. But I'm saying you should start with just, you get to see how cool the universe is.
Right. And I think you said it's impermanent. And then you went from impermanent to enamored coolness.
Yeah.
A lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, we need a little bit of stability. We need a little bit of permanence, to feel. So how does impermanence translate to coolness in your mind? Because some people might find that frightening.
Well, it's permanently impermanent, like it's not that things are just like total chaos. I mean, there's order. There's a tremendous amount of order.
Yeah.
But that order is dynamical, and our perception of that order is not only affecting the order, but it's also affecting us, affecting how we interact with that reality. I mean, this stuff inevitably feels sort of philosophical, but I'm telling you, it's much more scientific than it is philosophical.
It's and I mean, I think scientific because it's observable, right? Mm-hmm. The things are constantly evolving, adapting, changing, just as we are constantly evolving, adapting, changing. And I think part of what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there's like we can get in sync with that.
Yeah.
Like we can get in sync with it.
You can get in sync with it.
And that to me would change.
And it's amazing to be in sync with it. It really is a liberating and freeing thing. If you're feeling stuck or trapped or any of that, it's to be in sync with the way things are is kind of cool. I mean, I think this probably is. I sometimes think, well, how can I make it simpler? And then I think, oh, well, this thing I'm about to say will make it simpler. And then I think maybe it won't.
Yeah.
But
well, we'll see.
So there's a thing in quantum mechanics or quantum physics, which is just the study of the really small stuff, like subatoms, small stuff, like infinitesimally small stuff. Small time scales. There's the thinking goes that the quantum world is super freaky, super strange. In fact, Einstein had a saying, which is there's spookiness at a distance. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a weird world where weird stuff happens, and it's oddly dynamical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the part that we hear a lot in the sciences, and it's very different from the human scale world, the scale of humans, which is kind of relative to quantum world, a very big scale, right? Versus the tiny scale. So the conventional wisdom is that the stuff that's happening at that tiny scale is totally different than the stuff that's happening at this human scale. And the possible takeaway from what we're talking about in this paper and in this podcast is that is not true. The dynamicism of the human scale world is every bit as quirky and dynamical and probabilistic and cloudy as the quantum world.
Right.
We just aren't paying attention. And when you learn DSRP at a very high level, when you know at a certain point, you realize, oh wow, this stuff is happening at every level of scale. It's happening in just conversations.
I mean, all the way down from like subatomic particles to human experiences. They're existing in this same constant dynamical patterns that are shifting, moving.
Yeah, not just dynamical, because you look around. Yeah, things are dynamical for sure, but dynamical in a spooky way where like every identity is an other, and that the identity and the other have to be intertwined, and changing one changes the other. Yeah. Which is, Einstein's spookiness at a distance, and just the fact that it's kind of clouds all the way down. It's clouds of probability all the way down, from this level all the way up and all the way down.
So if you're out there listening to this, I mean, I think people would say, okay, if it's clouds of probability all across levels of scale, what does that mean for my daily experience? Like, how are things different for me if I know that?
Well, so for example, we think about our identity, but our identity is constantly shifting.
Yes. So
it's not a thing; it's a cloud of probability, and when we pay attention to it, we collapse, the definition of that thing. But most of the things we're throwing around as definitions are actually clouds of probabilities. And we collapse them when we talk about the project.
I see.
We collapse them when we talk about my identity. We collapse them when we talk about this emotion. The first line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao.
Right.
That is similar to what I'm talking about, is like these things these words that we use, these things that we see, these things that we experience appear as discrete.
Yeah.
And forever. Yeah. But they're constantly changing, and when we look at them, they become discrete.
Right. And I think what's interesting is your example of identity, right? So if you realize that your identity in and of itself is a cloud that's shifting, like in one situation, my identity is this, and another it's this, and it's all defined by the other around me in relation to the other. That means you can avoid things like lock-in, bias, identity politics, because you can start to see that things are not as black and white, right? They're more permeable, those boundaries. So that to me is an interesting way to think about it, because it seems on its surface very kind of heady and difficult to understand.
I know it does. That's the part that's...
So I want to try to bring it down to, if you see that things are always shifting and that things are changing, evolving.
It's not even that things are always shifting.
Yeah, they're
your
not even
perception.
Things.
Yeah, they're not even things. They're probability clouds. They're like swirling.
Yeah.
And your perception of them is causing them to be things. There are no things. There are no bricks.
Just clouds.
Just clouds.
Which makes things more fluid, more open.
Which makes it so, for example, you can be an and both thinker. Mm-hmm. It makes it so that you can see both sides of a polarized issue and say, I can totally see how someone would think those things. And I can totally see how someone would think those things.
The opposing things.
Things. Mm-hmm. And I can totally see how neither of them is quite accurate, but both are right.
But then what happens is that perspectival shift actually is bringing reality more into focus.
Yes.
Right? Those clouds are becoming, how would I say it? Because I'm able to see something that's cloud-like from many different perspectives, it's actually taking more of a form.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like you're not coming at it from your opinions, you're coming at it from what exists.
Yes, and you're seeing it.
And you're seeing what exists. And because you're seeing what exists, you're able to kind of just be in sync with it.
Well, and you can interact with it more effectively.
With it. Yeah. But we are very governed by by our crystallized opinions that have crystallized in form over time and gotten reinforced by societal and social norms of what we think things are. But,
yeah,
they're not that.
No, and I mean, it's the difference between walking in and saying, I know what that is, versus, I wonder what that is. Like, I'm going to explore what the possibility is of that thing, rather than just saying, I know what that thing is.
This episode is sponsored by Training Camp, the ultimate online spot for building the mental fitness that drives personal and professional change and success. At Training Camp, you'll have access to the science and practice of thinking, with personalized thinking assessments, tiered training, and best of all, practice that improves skill. Go to cabreralab.org to learn more. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, take, for example, like an example, like fires, right? Mm-hmm. There's been some fires. Every year we have fires and stuff like that. Well, from the perspective of a firefighter, a fire means work, a job, service, protection, all the things that a firefighter sees, and also all the technical things that they have to deal with about fire and how it works. From the perspective of an ecologist, they might see this is a natural cycle of burning the forests, right? The undergrowth. Mm-hmm. From the perspective of a homeowner, they might see, total disaster.
Yes.
Risk. Of the risk.
Loss.
From the perspective of an insurance company, they might see a premium.
Yeah.
Well, who's right?
They're all right.
They're all right. But we jump to an opinion of what the thing is, and we capture it. And when we capture it, we assume that's what it is. And it makes us feel good. Our surface selves, we feel good because we don't feel like there's too much. We feel like we contained it.
We have some control.
We have control over it, and we love control. And I'm saying when you release the need for control, right? Mm-hmm. Like the poster in our room, love liberates, it doesn't bind.
Yes.
When you or the old saying, if you love something, set it free. If you love reality, set it free. Stop containing it in these definitions. Let your definitions be temporary. Mm-hmm. Let your distinctions be temporary for the moment that you need them, and then understand that they evolve, they change, they're dynamical, and the context is changing. The distinction is stepping into another river.
Well, and because that containment is what limits our understanding.
It limits your understanding.
It limits what we see, what we interact with. It limits our understanding of things.
Yes.
It causes us to be biased.
I know this sounds very kind of like maybe esoteric or something, but I'm not prone to esoteric conversations. So I'm telling you that this is empirical. This is the way the universe is.
Right. I think what's interesting is you say, so it's empirically, we've tested empirically that DSRP, those 4 structural patterns, exist both in mind and in nature.
Yeah, in what's called ontologically and epistemologically. Like,
right.
Ontologically means in nature, in reality.
Yeah.
Whether you know them or not. Like, whether you know what gravity is or not, gravity's happening.
Yes.
Whether you know about DSRP or not, it's happening. That's ontological. Epistemological is it's happening in your brain. And metacognition is you're aware of it happening in your brain. And what we know is it's happening ontologically, it's happening epistemologically, and if you're aware of it happening metacognitively, it has a really powerful effect on your abilities in your life.
Yes. And let's go back to ontology.
Yeah.
Because that's the part where I think people get hung up.
I know.
And I
it's
think
hard.
one way to explain it maybe simply is when you say DSRP exists ontologically, what you're saying is the universe itself, and I'm just saying universe just to have a concept, right, is organized in these 4 ways. Like things naturally are distinguished. They are related. There are many different perspectives.
They group.
They group. They connect.
They ungroup.
They ungroup. That's when you say ontologically, that's what you mean is things exist in DSRP patterns.
Yeah.
They exist that way.
Yeah.
The real world exists in these patterns.
Yes.
Noun. The way we think is we distinguish things. We systematize things.
Yes. Because the
verb
real world exists in those patterns, our thinking
is derived
from those patterns.
Right.
Yes.
So when you say the grammar of reality, what you're saying is both of these things are organized in those ways.
Yes.
In those very specific 4 ways.
Yes.
So to me, in the early days when I was talking to people about this, I would use noun verb.
Yes.
Right? Noun, the universe exists in distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives. Verb, when we're thinking about it, we are distinguishing, systematizing, relating, and taking perspective. Which is probably an oversimplification.
Yeah. I mean, I would even use the noun verb as a great sort of pedagogical tool to think about exactly what we've been talking about, which is we tend to see the world in nouns, but the whole world is verbs.
Oh, see, I like that. I like that.
Right? So we tend to see these noun-like things everywhere. But all of those things are in motion. All of those things are verbing out.
Yes, but our experience is that they're nouns.
But our experience is that they're nouns, and sometimes for a brief moment we need them to be nouns, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So that we can do things with them. But then recognize that once we turn away, they go back to being verbs.
They do, but then when we turn back, they're still nouns.
When we turn back, and that's that the observer is affecting the observed.
Yes.
It's called the collapse of the wave function.
I've been waiting for us to say that on podcasts. That's one of my favorite things you taught me a long, long time ago. Collapse of the wave function. I love that.
Yeah.
It is the collapse of the wave function.
Yes.
Super nerdy.
It's a little
This is a very nerdy episode.
I think so. I didn't
Maybe
know
all
we were
the
going to
the
go into
nerds
this.
of the world will unite in some way, shape, or form.
But I hope that people take away from it that I mean, not only is this going to help you be more successful in all the various things personal that you do, and we can talk about all the reasons. I mean, we have research on all the positive effects it has on problem solving and complexity navigation and all that kind of stuff, right? Critical thinking and blah blah blah. But I hope people take away that this can really improve the quality of your life. It can improve how enamored you are with everything around you.
Yes, and also I think it's not just about being enamored with it, but being open to seeing it all.
Yeah.
When you're open to seeing it all, then some of those biases we have, some of those blinders we have, they start to come off.
They come off.
And then you have a different experience.
And the box opens up.
Yeah.
And you realize that you've been living in a box.
Well, and there are consequences to that box.
And there's consequences to the box.
And there's better consequences to getting out of that box.
Yeah, and you can get out of the box that you're in. Because we're ruled by a lot of these preconceived notions, beliefs, norms, and certainly norms are important. So social norms are important for the collective dynamics and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying do away with all norms, but there's a bunch of norms that are just BS. Like they're not helping you.
No. And
why are we allegiant to them? And being able to question those norms that have nounified, ossified as nouns, when really they're verbs. There's a lot of ossification that happens in our lives, and being able to Marie Kondo that shit, get rid of it.
Simplify.
Get rid of all the ossifying mental models of your life.
Yeah, because it weighs you down.
And you don't even know that it's weighing you down because it's all locked up in here. And if you're not aware of it, and what these patterns help you to do is see, oh, wait a minute, the reason that I'm living my life in this particular way is because I believe this particular thing, but nothing about the universe says I have to believe that particular thing. The only person stopping me from being in that box is me.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is understand that it's just a box that I created.
Well, and the tremendous amount of agency that creates.
Oh my God!
See it.
It's tremendous.
And then things are not fatalistic and not predetermined. You have agency as you move through the universe in a way that's far different.
And you don't.
Right.
And this is the end both. Because at the same time that you have tremendous agency, you also realize that you're like a little ping pong ball in a swirling ocean.
Yeah.
And there are currents that are much bigger than you that no matter how hard you swim, you're going with the current.
So you might as well go.
So relax.
Just lie back and
chill.
Go with the flow.
Get your floaty and your koozie. And
your point is, sometimes if you sort of go, instead of trying to force your will upon the universe, you kind of get in sync with it, then you're going to have different outcomes. And also you'll struggle less.
Yeah.
And you'll be far more open to the way that things go. Naturally.
Well, and I think we've talked about it before, but in my brief stint as a river guide after being a mountain guide for many, many years, I just noticed, that the old timer guides versus the new young strapping, big strong guys, the young guys. The young guys would be cranking the oars and all this stuff and really overworking it and over muscling it, and the old timers would have a big sombrero hat on or something like that, and they would pay attention to the river, and they understood the fluid dynamics, and they would wait and then put an oar in the water. Maybe one pull, maybe two pulls, the boat would turn, the water would hit the boat in just the right way and bring the boat to exactly where they wanted it in the river. And that's the freedom of being in sync with reality. Mm-hmm. That freedom that comes with, because I'm paying attention to all the dynamics, I know that if I just put my oar in here and make one pull, the boat will turn, and the force of the river will move the boat instead of the force of my biceps. Mm-hmm. And the force of the river is so much greater than the force of your biceps. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can leverage that
very
force.
Effective.
Well,
so that's the part where you're not just happier and more in sync, right, and more enamored and more in love with reality. You're also more effective.
Well, you're getting where you need to go.
You're getting where
faster with less
safer,
effort.
Faster, with less effort. So, that's the professional, all the ROI stuff that we care about.
Yeah.
So it's hard sometimes for people to see that this stuff happens on multiple scales. You're going to be happier.
Right.
Which we don't talk about enough. We don't talk about those kinds of things enough. I think we're all very focused on success in the
accomplishing stuff,
accomplishment. Mm-hmm. But we see this with our students. I mean, they're all so driven to be successful that sometimes that drive to be successful is actually the things that makes you miserable, and that misery makes you not so successful.
Yeah. Well, it dampens your success.
It dampens your success, and it certainly, even with your quote unquote success, you don't enjoy the success because you spend so much time ossifying into this machine that only cares about a particular thing.
Well, that's the grammar of reality.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of went off. I mean, the paper's more specific about how the human scale world is very much like the quantum world.
Yes.
That they're very similar.
Yeah, but if people don't read the paper, the net of it is pretty clear, right? About seeing that there's this underlying pattern structure to all of those things, and that seeing that will have different outcomes for you.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to think that there are patterns to the way things. I was sitting in the Sierra Nevada on a multi-week course in the mountains, and this is quite a rare moment when you see these things. But there was a big rock, bigger than this table, round rock, sitting in a what used to be glaciated. So the glacier melts. The glacier's way up here, and then big rocks fall onto the glacier, and then the glacier takes them down. And then the glacier melts, and you end up with like a rock.
Yeah.
That's called a glacial erratic.
Yeah. That's
just sitting in a very strange place that it couldn't have gotten there. Honestly, and you go, how'd that get there, right? And I was sitting there, and this is a huge rock. I mean, this is like a house-sized rock.
Yeah, that's cool.
It cracked.
While you were sitting there?
While I was sitting there.
Like you heard the noise and it...
Yep.
That's cool.
And it went like an egg. It went... And one rock became two rocks. Mm-hmm. So that's nature distinguishing. And now those two rocks are going to go on separate trajectories. And this happens all the time, everywhere we look, right? And likewise, rocks can come together and in magma kind of like meld together. Mm-hmm. And that's multiple rocks or two rocks becoming one. That's systems grouping.
Yeah.
Part whole.
Yeah.
Right? So things break and things group.
Yeah.
And that happens whether we are perceiving it or not. Nature is doing that. That's
a cool story.
Yeah.
I don't think you've told me that yet.
Yeah. That's happening all the time, And the identity of something. I was in another place in the Sierra Nevada. There's this huge cliff. Mm-hmm. And it's on a river. And the cliff has these overhangs and this amazing overhang, and you can rappel off of it and stuff like that. And that's the identity of the cliff, right?
Yeah.
That's what the profile of the cliff is like that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, down off to the left is a building-size rock, which is sitting in the river and has split the river into two. Mm-hmm. Well, at some point, that rock fits perfectly into that face.
Yeah.
And that face was a sheer face.
Yeah.
It wasn't an overhang.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then nature just kind of said, oh. And now that thing is this whole separate thing. It's its own ecological system. Yeah. It's changed the course of the river. It's, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And we so that's just talking about distinctions and systems, part whole and distinguishing, which, by the way, is the same as in calculus. We have differentials and integrals, right? We have differentiation and integration.
Right.
So this is a natural part of things, is that things differentiate and things integrate.
Right.
Things distinguish and things systematize, right?
Yeah.
That's a pattern of the universe. And we did a study of all across the disciplines of DSRP, across many, many disciplines, from physics to chemistry to biology to psychology to ecology to sociology and, all of the geology, you name it, all the different disciplines, business, policy, etc. And there's many studies, hundreds of studies, but one of the studies of atoms,
Yes.
and this is an experimental study that shows that an atom has a perspective on its surroundings.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. Right? Now, is it like our perspective? No, it's not. It's not like, thinking about, but it is perceiving in an atom-like way its surroundings.
Yes.
And altering its behavior based on its surroundings.
And it's aware of itself, its own. It's
aware of its surroundings.
Its surroundings.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. Awareness.
No, I didn't mean itself. Yeah, like there's a boundary between it and the surroundings.
There's a boundary.
And that is known.
Yes.
Not that it has self-awareness like a human, but there is a boundary that is known.
Yes.
Between it and the other things.
Yep. Single-celled organisms have that, and there's the classic. There's a great video online. You can look on YouTube. Just look for dog hockey puck.
Oh yeah, Maggie.
Is it Maggie?
Her name is Maggie.
Is that her name?
I think her name is
Amazing
Maggie.
Dog in a net.
Yeah.
And there's like 20 balls and one hockey puck.
Yeah.
And so the dog is gonna stop the hockey puck, but not the balls. And the guy's shooting the balls into the net. And the dog's playing goalie.
Yeah.
The dog's just totally locked in, collapsed on the hockey puck. Right. So in that moment, there's a hockey puck, and everything else is not the hockey puck. Now, there's a purple ball, and everything else is not the purple ball. And there's a yellow ball, and everything else is not. But right now, at this moment, all those other things are just not a hockey puck.
Yes. She's making that distinction.
Right. So all those things are existing in clouds of probability.
Yeah.
But in the one moment, for one purpose, from one perspective, Maggie collapses onto that hockey puck. And it's hockey puck, not hockey puck.
The whole universe is organized that way.
For a brief moment, the whole universe is organized as hockey puck, not hockey puck.
Interesting.
So these things are happening all the time. And of course, webs of causality is all relationships and cause and effect. Newton's third law and action reaction. Those are universal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's remarkable that our brains are very capable and very aligned with, if we let them be, nature. And a lot of what I've done in my life is spent a lot of time in nature. So, you get normed to the patterns of nature rather than normed to the patterns of society. And sometimes I think the norms of society are quite unhealthy.
Yeah, and it's nice.
The norms of nature are really kind of wonderful.
Healthy.
Yeah, it's also
by implication
kind of brutal sometimes.
That's true, but it's real.
It's real.
It's honest. Yeah. It's true. That's true. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's that.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot to explain, but I think that
I hope
the examples and things help.
I hope it helped.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap.